Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do another sort of year-end check-in where today I'm going to look at the most anticipated books of 2021 that I had listed and how I did, how many of them I managed to read, which ones I purchased and hauled but still have to come, and all of that. So I did 2 videos on my most anticipated reads of 2021. One of them in January. I'm going to link both of them in the description box down below. I did better on the one in January. I think that probably makes sense because I had a lot more time to try to get to those books and keep an eye out for them. I will put a link to the one I did for the second half of the year down below as well. Again, that one I did not do as well, but let's run through and see exactly what happened. Some of my favorite reads of the year ended up being on these lists. Some of my least favorite or most disappointing books of the year ended up being on this list. So let's start with the one that I did in January. I did a second one because more books were announced and other things were coming out that just weren't on my radar. Some things had changed. So let's start with the one that I did in January and talk about that. There were 19 books on that list. There were originally 20, but there was a Jennifer Egan book that ended up moving to next year, 2022. So I'll see if I will end up including that on my 2022 most anticipated list, which will be coming in January. Now, all of the books on this list were done in chronological order of their release date, and I'm just going to stick with that. So the first one on the list was The Inland Sea by Madeleine Watts. This was released on January 12th. I purchased a copy immediately. This is published by Catapult, and I just didn't get around to it all year. So I'm thinking that this will be a good item to hold on to for Aussie April. I mean, I already have a copy of it. It's here. So hopefully I will be getting to it around then. I still want to get to it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. The next book on the list was Just As I Am by Cicely Tyson, which was published on January 25th. And I did read that one almost immediately, but I listened to it on audio. I do not have a physical copy of it. And I liked it. I didn't love it. I had a couple of quibbles with it, especially as it went on. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about what I liked and what I didn't like about it. But I had pluses and minuses, as with any celebrity memoir. I feel like celebrity memoirs are a tough sell because inevitably, I guess with all memoirs, it starts to feel like there are blind spots or there are areas in which somebody will try to make themselves look better. And this definitely fell victim to that. The next one on the list was Let Me Tell You What I Mean by Joan Didion. And I am filming this on Thursday, December 23rd, and news broke today that Joan Didion died. And that really hit me very hard. I will talk about that a lot more in the Friday Reads video that when you are watching this will have already been posted. So if you are interested in my thoughts on Joan Didion, please feel free to look for the Friday Reads video that was posted the day before this. I did read this. I actually got an advanced copy of this on NetGalley, and I liked it, didn't love it. Joan Didion is a fantastic writer. She's not really capable of doing something bad, but I did feel like the collection didn't quite come together in a meaningful way, but it's really well written, and I did enjoy it. If you are a Joan Didion enthusiast, check it out. If you haven't read anything by her, definitely check out some other stuff first. It's not a good entry point to Joan Didion. The next one was The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Masood, which was released on February 2nd. I did read this book. You can see I got a copy from Book of the Month, but I ended up listening to it on audio. This is one of my favorite reads of the year. I won't say where it is on the list. You're going to have to wait to find out that one. But yes, I read this and absolutely loved it. This was also one of my books that I hope more people discover, which I read this year. And I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below as well. The next one was How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherie Jones. That was also published on February 2nd, and I did get around to reading it. I got a copy from the library, so I don't have one that I can hold up. It was on the list for the Women's Prize and ultimately did not win, but it was a good book. Again, I had some quibbles with it, so it doesn't break into my favorites of the year, but I did really like it. I think there was a coincidence in the beginning, which I was able to get by, but there was a coincidence in the end that I got a little bit stuck on, but I did like it. The next one is something I ultimately purchased. It's Gay Bar, Why We Went Out by Jeremy Atherton Lynn. I ended up purchasing this one because I wanted to get it from the library. I wanted to try to seek out the audio, but the audio wasn't available anywhere and my library wasn't getting a copy. It was just not showing up anywhere. So finally I ordered it, and here it is, because I wanted to have it so I could get around to reading it. And I never did in the last half of the year. So this is a candidate to go on my TBR for June. In June, I always prioritize Pride reading and do LGBTQ books. So my pile is always a little bit untenable. So will I get to it in June? I don't know. But it is something I am still interested in and would still like to get to. And I have a copy here for whenever I am in the mood. The next one ended up being a DNF. It's Let's Get Back to the Party by Salih, which was published on February 16th. I started listening to this on audio, and it's supposed to be about two different gay men who are a little older, but roughly my age. They grew up in the era where AIDS had already happened, but before gay rights really became a thing, so they felt kind of caught in the middle. And I thought it was going to be interesting because that is kind of my story. That's the age bracket that I fall into. But the characters were not very likable, and likability is fine. I can get around it. But the way in which they approached the argument seemed very cynical, and I didn't really approach it. So one of them thinks that current gay culture is sort of selling out and conforming to what is more expected, and the other one thinks it's kind of nice and is a little bit jealous of younger generations of gay people because they are able to do things he was not able to when he was young. But the tone of it felt very kind of snide and nasty, and I really wasn't enjoying it, so I ended up not finishing it, and we're gonna leave it at that. So that one was a disappointment. The next one was also a disappointment, but I did finish it. It's Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was published in March. I really loved Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day. I really did not like this all that much, which was disappointing. I feel like it flirts with things that Never Let Me Go does, but Never Let Me Go had so much more resonance for me. I feel like there are a lot of ideas here and they never cohere into anything. And because Never Let Me Go is a bit of a bleak book, and there are bleak things in this book, but because it's a little more optimistic, nothing quite lands, and it doesn't always feel that there are stakes, which is funny because there are certainly stakes, but nothing feels urgent in this book. But I did get around to reading it. It just was a bit of a disappointment. The next one is Abundance by Jakob Guanzon, which was longlisted for the National Book Award, but did not make the shortlist. I have a copy on hold on Scribd, which I would like to get to at some point. Still, it sounds like a very intriguing book to me, and I would still like to try it, hopefully in 2022, because it's not going to happen in 2021 at this point. The next one is Last Call, a true story of love, lust, and murder in queer New York. I did get around to reading this one. I enjoyed it, and it does that thing. I don't really do true crime all that much anymore. If I do true crime, it needs to have a larger point to it or sympathize with the victims rather than the perpetrator. And this one definitely does that. It treats the story of the victims as a way of looking at the ways in which gay people were marginalized and things that happened to them were marginalized. The fact that it took so long for police to catch on that there was a serial killer is a big example of that. And the lives that these victims had, it focuses on that much more than it does. It finally does focus in on the killer at the end, but it feels like the spotlight is much more on the victims, their lives, what their lives were like, and their sad ends and what that meant for society at large at the time. And I thought that was very interesting. The next one I got a copy of but didn't get around to reading. It's Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge, and I've heard good things about it. So I'm still looking forward to getting to this at some point. And since I have a copy, hopefully I will be inspired by seeing it on my shelf and will pick it up, but I have not gotten to it yet. The next one was the final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton, which I read and enjoyed. It is another one of my favorite reads of the year, and I will reveal where it falls on that list a little bit later. But I did enjoy this. It's an oral history about race and fame and celebrity and who is allowed to tell stories and who is believed and who is blamed and held accountable and culpable and who we are willing to throw under the bus, basically. I found it very interesting, and I am looking forward to what Dawnie Walton does next. The next one was Paradise, Nevada by Dario Diofebi. I did end up reading this book. I managed to get a copy on NetGalley, and I admit I skimmed the last part of the book because I just really wasn't enjoying it. It's one of those stories that has a bunch of different stories that are supposed to come together, and it didn't quite come together for me. I wasn't really enjoying that. I thought the structure was a little unwieldy. It keeps introducing characters late in the book, so it feels like the story keeps expanding and not quite getting to the point. and that was a bit of a disappointment. So I finished it, and it's just fine, I would say. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. The next one is something I had earmarked for Women in Translation Month, and I ended up not getting to it. It's There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikuko Tsumura. She is a famous author in Japan, but this was the first time that her work was translated into English, which is what caught my attention. I didn't get around to it for Women in Translation Month. I didn't manage to fit it in after that either, because after that I sort of hit a slump, and by the time I got back on the bandwagon, I was trying to head into the end of the year and finish up some other things. So I do still want to read this. If I don't get to it anytime in the beginning of the year in 2022, it's a prime candidate for Women in Translation Month 2022. So stay tuned. I am still looking forward to getting to this at some point. It is compared to Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, I believe is the name. So that intrigued me as well. The next one was Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. I have read almost every fiction book published by Jhumpa Lahiri. This was not going to be the first one that I let go. I got it from the library. It is a departure from her previous work, and I wouldn't have guessed that I was looking forward to a departure from her, but I thought it was a really beautifully done novel. She originally published it in Italian because she has become fascinated with the Italian language recently, and then she translated it into English herself, and it is now available here as well. I liked it a lot. The next one was The Secret to Superhuman Strength by Alison Bechdel. I'm on a bit of a roller coaster with Alison Bechdel because I really love Fun Home. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Was not too keen on Are You My Mother? And I read her graphic collection of her famous cartoon strip. I'm not going to say the name of it. And I thought that it was clever and smart, but ultimately didn't finish that collection. So I wasn't quite sure ultimately if I was looking forward to this one or not, but I did put it on the list and I did read it and I did like it. I think it's much more successful than Are You My Mother? And interestingly, in this one, she even references what she seems to think of as some sort of failures with Are You My Mother, which I would believe, being perfectly honest and blunt. So I did get around to reading it. I got a copy from the library and I enjoyed it. The next one is Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. I never got around to it. I got a copy from the library at one point and I didn't manage to squeeze it in before it had to be returned. I have it saved on one of my subscription apps. Hopefully I will get to it in 2022. And the next one is Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, which was released later in the year. It was released in September, but it had already been announced earlier in the year. So I didn't get around to it, but I have my copy here ready to go, and I am looking forward to getting to it. And then the final one from my January most anticipated was Fight Night by Miriam Taves, which was published in October, and I did get around to reading this one. Unfortunately, I didn't like it very much. That was a bit of a disappointment because I love All My Puny Sorrows, and I had been looking forward to... I really like women talking a lot, and I had been looking forward to this one, and I just didn't think it came together in any kind of urgent way. So that is Fight Night. And those are all of the books that I was looking forward to in January. So of the 19 books, I ended up reading 12, which means I still have 7 books to go, which is actually pretty good. Like I said, I did much better on the most anticipated books list that I did earlier in the year. I think it's understandable why, but something to think about in 2022. I don't know if I'm going to do the back half most anticipated video like I did this year, because I had a much better success rate off of this one. Just keeping an eye out for them, and because they were released earlier in the year, I had time to get around to the other ones. Let's look at the one I did for the second half of the year. So for the second half of the year, there were 9 books. The first one was Run by John Lewis, which I did get from the library and I did read and I liked it, but it felt... I feel like I should revisit when the other 2 volumes are published, if they are published, because they say that they had this book complete before John Lewis died. They haven't really said anything about the other 2 books, so I assume they're still going to come. But I feel like I binged the March trilogy when they were all released, and I feel like you get the overall picture. This one feels like a lot of setup because it's changing direction from the March books. It's about how he pivots to politics. The first volume, Run, finds him kind of disillusioned with the direction, finding himself on the outs with the organization he has been working with, and then at the end, he needs to find something else to do, and that's where he's going to sort of pivot to politics. So it feels like a transitional book, and for that, you really need the other 2. So I'm going to wait for them. I'm still interested, but it felt like it's a bridge book, not something that stands on its own all that well. The next one is In the Country of Others by Leila Slimani. I did not get around to this for a long time. My library didn't have it. It wasn't on any subscription apps. Finally, my library has a copy, and I am on hold for it. So I don't know when I will get it. Hopefully soon. I think I'm coming up to the top. I have to be coming up to the top because it's been like 2 months at this point. So we'll see. I'm still going to try to get to that one. Then there's All In, an autobiography by Billie Jean King. I have this saved to my wish list on Libro because I think the audio is going to be a good way to go. I still want to get to it, and I am hopefully going to get to it. I have a rule for myself with Libro. I don't make a purchase until I am for sure going to do that book next. Because a lot of the time what will happen is I'll purchase, and they end up just sitting there and I never get around to them. So I'm waiting to know when it's time before I make that purchase. But it's there, it's ready, just waiting for me, and we'll see when I get to it. And we just lost power, which is exciting. But the next one is The Magician by Colm Tabine. I apologize for the lighting. This one I did not get around to either. It's going to wait until 2022. I might do a different Colm Tabine book first. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to finish because I don't know when the power will be back. The next one is Please Don't Sit on My Bed in Your Outside Clothes by Phoebe Robinson. I definitely still want to get to this. We'll see when I do. The next one was Taste, My Life Through Food by Stanley Tucci, which I did read. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of it, and it is one of my favorite of the year as well, because Stanley Tucci is just a charming person, and him talking about food is delightful. Him talking about his life is delightful. Him talking about anything is delightful. So I did read this, and I really enjoyed it a great deal. The next one is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Alir Sens. I did read this. I had to pause it briefly in the middle because I hit a reading slump, and that's not the fault of the book, but I really enjoyed it. It's going to be one of my favorites for the year as well. I'm really glad I managed to finish it in the calendar year. I struggled a little bit in the beginning because I was having some anxiety at the time. And so when I got back to the book, I enjoyed it much more than I had been in the beginning. We're cruising right along. The next one is Monster in the Middle by Tiffany Unique. I got a copy, have not gotten around to reading it. Still really interested in it and looking forward to it. And then the last one is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, which I got from the library, but I'm not going to have time to read right now with the holidays, and we have to travel a little bit, so it's just not going to happen. It's due back this weekend, and I haven't had a chance to return it yet because everything building up to the holidays has been crazy. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to return it. I'll get back on the wait list, and when it comes back around, I will read it. So of those 9 books, I read 3, which is not as good, but considering timing and everything else going on, it's not actually bad either. So altogether, what do I have? 9 plus 19 is 28, and 12 plus 3 is 15. So I did 15 out of 28 books. That's not great, but it's not bad either. It seems like the lighting is getting worse, so I'm going to leave it at that. I apologize for the lighting again, and I'm just going to say that if you follow along, I appreciate that, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.